LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the June 14th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Happy Flag Day for those who celebrate here in the United States. Thanks for joining me. I'll be using the 10 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, except no Meet the Press because it was preempted by sports. So even though it was Sunday, it wasn't Meet the Press. So their slogan is a lie. I've talked about that for many years. But I will take those 10 clips, add my political commentary and media criticism for what should be an interesting, informative, fair use, transformational video for you here today. This is the second episode of my Monday Media Mix-Up that I've moved from my LiberalViewer Sunday Live clip roundup, and I will be covering all the clips except for some of the news summaries. We'll go off onto some other topics, but I will be mainly covering my title topic, Biden leads democracies against autocracies, and I'll be doing that by juxtaposing the news summaries from ABC, Fox News, CBS, and CNN, and then using 5 newsmaker clips, President Joe Biden, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, former Trump Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, the ranking Republican member of the House Foreign Relations Committee Michael McCaul, and then finally Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi. And like last week, I've put a brief description of all the clips, all 10 clips down in the video description, and for the recorded show viewers, I will put time indexes in there so you can switch to the clips that most interest you. But before I get to the newsmaker clips, I want to start with, what passes for political comedy on the, in the highbrow liberal media discussions on the Sunday morning news analysis shows, I guess. It's sort of like high concept humorous imagery that CNN's Dana Bash elicited from journalist Susan Glasser in the clip I will discuss with you after we watch it together over here.
You spent time reporting on and from inside Russia for a long time. So talk about what you're seeing ahead of that meeting and the way that the U.S. president is trying to manage expectations.
Well, that's right. I think that, certainly in one way he has an easy job of it in the sense that Donald Trump has set a pretty low bar to jump over. If your goal is to say, I looked Putin in the eye and I talked tough with him, well, that's going to be easy. Just the other day, you had Trump, in fact, reminding us how much he had a bizarre affinity for the Russian leader, saying, I liked him, he liked me. What's the problem with that? So in that sense, Biden, is going to communicate a clear message of getting tough. But remember that Vladimir Putin, although he is an autocrat, also has politics of his own. And I think the fact that they're not going to have a joint press conference is a reminder that both Putin and Biden will be able then to essentially sell their own version, their own narrative of this meeting to their own domestic constituency. So Vladimir Putin can say, well, I was tough, and look at me, I'm respected on the world stage, and, I'm going toe-to-toe with the American adversary, and the West is declining. And then you'll have Joe Biden saying basically the exact opposite. Remember that this is the 5th American president who has had to deal with Vladimir Putin. He's already been in power longer than any Russian leader since Joseph Stalin. And, Putin knows exactly what he's doing. He appreciates and wants to be seen and respected as an equal on the world stage. But at the same time, he will make trouble. He will find a way to get under the skin of the Americans. As Fiona Hill, who was in the room the last time these American leader Donald Trump met with Putin in Helsinki, she said to me, it's like the boys who are desperate to sit with girls in the school lunchroom, but then they spend the whole time kicking them under the table.
That is some real imagery that everybody, no matter what language you speak, I think can relate to. Susan Glasser, Jeff Zeleny, thank you so much for that report.
So, yeah, I don't know. Was that a joke at the end there? It was actually a metaphor that is giving some important information that really didn't come across in most of the news programming I saw yesterday, which was that, at least when it comes to Russia, in this democracy versus autocracy fight, Russia is really outmatched by the United States. You know, a lot of people like me who grew up in the Cold War think of like the United States and the Soviet Union as the superpowers. But Russia has, I mean, it was never really that strong economically, and it has vestiges of its Soviet military power. But I think the economy of Russia is like the same size as Italy, which, you know, no offense to my Italian friends out there, but isn't, you know, superpower status, I guess. So really, when we talk about Biden wanting to have a fight of democracies versus autocracies, there is like all this nefarious activity by Vladimir Putin and Russia, and I'd say Russia in the last few years has definitely like outpunched its weight class or whatever. It's made a lot of trouble, outsized trouble compared to its, you know, economic and other, you know, strengths. Even its military strength isn't as great as the Soviet Union's was, although it does have all those nuclear weapons. So when we're talking about democracy versus autocracy, the, you know, real competitor autocracy is China. And China is doing all this economic development. Actually, the next thing I'm going to show you is a clip. I think in this clip, if you watch the whole Biden press conference from the UK yesterday, part of this clip, I think I might have cut the part out where he talks about the China Belt and Road program, where there's this program where China is trying to develop a lot of underdeveloped countries and creating all these roads that for China's trade routes. It's I don't want to go off onto a tangent about that, but my point here is that it's really China who is the main autocracy that the United States is competing against, but it's not competing against so much in terms of like a military fight like the Cold War. It's more, you know, which system actually works better. That, you know, one of the things Putin and Russia has been really good at doing in the last 4 years, or the last few years, where they've outpunched their weight class, like I was saying, is they've undermined faith in American democracy through the whole Russia collusion scandal, where there was no criminal charges, but, you know, the Trump administration, Donald Trump Jr. did have that June 2016 meeting in Trump Tower, Don Trump Jr., with some Russian who's going to give him dirt on Hillary. And Trump's campaign manager, Paul Manafort, did pass campaign polling information to a Russian agent, Konstantin Kilimnik. And Roger Stone did have ongoing conversations with Trump, and then coordinated the release of Russia's hacked DNC material with Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. So there was all that Russia collusion going on. That this is all important to remember when I get to the comparisons later of Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, who's tougher on Russia. But despite the fact that Russia had all that success with undermining Americans' faith in their elections, and maybe even helping Donald Trump get elected, like I said, China is the real long-term competitor. And after Biden talked about that yesterday in his press conference, here's how he restates this talking point that goes all the way back through his campaign about how he wants to be the warrior for democracy against autocracy that I used for the title of, you know, my title topic today over in this clip.
I know this is going to sound somewhat prosaic, but I think we're in a contest, not with China per se, but a contest with autocrats, autocratic governments around the world, as whether or not democracies can compete with them in the rapidly changing 21st century. And I think how we act and whether we pull together as democracies is going to determine whether our grandkids look back 15 years from now and say, did they step up? Are democracies as relevant and as powerful as they have been? And I walked away from the meeting with all of my colleagues believing that they are convinced that that is correct now too. Not, I shouldn't say now, not just because of me, but they believe that to be the case.
So yeah, like I said, that is Joe Biden reiterating this talking point that goes back to his campaign, how he's going to be a warrior for democracy against autocracy. And it's not necessarily a military competition. It's also a competition to show which system actually works better. I mean, is the United States and Europe, are they declining powers, or are they going to eventually overcome some of the challenges that seem to be facing them based on the rise of China and the I don't know what you would call what Russia's doing, but the Russia trying to create this, I don't know, this like old European white Christian autocratic hegemony across parts of, you know, the non-free parts of Europe, or I don't know. I think I have more European viewers for my live viewers doing it this time. I saw before I started the show, one of my European viewers was thanking me for not doing my show in the middle of the night in Europe. So maybe I can get some live comments from European viewers, if there are any amongst the people watching now, while we start going through the news summaries. Like I said before, I'm going to show you all four of the news summaries in order from longest to shortest, since there's no Meet the Press. It's ABC, Fox News, CBS, and CNN. And most of them just concentrated on the European trip. It's actually CNN, the shortest one, that gives you the most information about other news stories, you know, domestic news stories. But I'll start with the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary. Martha Raddatz does the introduction, and then they have their chief foreign correspondent Ian Pannell reporting from the UK, all about Biden's European trip, and I will talk about that with you a little more after we watch that news summary together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. Joe Biden taking his first major turn on the world stage as president, attending the final day of the G7 summit in Cornwall, holding a press conference this morning ahead of the next leg of his trip, including what promises to be a more challenging face-to-face with Russia's President Putin. That high-stakes summit coming at a critical time on the heels of cyber attacks targeting our food and fuel. A lot to prove to our allies, adversaries, and Americans here at home. According to our new ABC News Ipsos poll, more than 40% think America's leadership in the world has gotten stronger under Biden, and more than half trust Biden to negotiate with world leaders on America's behalf, though that drops slightly when it comes to President Putin. So what does success look like at this next summit, and what meaningful progress can be achieved? Secretary of State Antony Blinken is standing by, but we begin our coverage this morning with ABC News senior foreign correspondent Ian Pannell. Ian, let's start with the G7 summit, the president delivering the message America is back and trying to rally allies to confront real major global issues.
Yeah, that's right. Good morning, Martha. This has been the diplomatic equivalent of getting the band back together, if you like. Even the sun came out to bathe the G7 leaders in this warm glow of camaraderie and unity. But I think many is going to be left wondering how substantial the meat in this particular sandwich has actually been. But first to the optics, and here the president was always on to a winner, if only by virtue of not being Donald Trump. The irascibility and truculence of his predecessor was gone. President Macron of France, Prime Minister Boris Johnson of Britain said they wouldn't be disagreeing with the president on anything. And on the substance, major promises on COVID vaccines, combating future pandemics, climate change, investment, taxation of wealthy corporations, although it's unclear what in the real world this is all going to add up to. Agreement again on the need to stand up to China and Russia, but less clear what this looks like, with some major differences clearly emerging from some nations who are less willing to confront China. Martha?
And Ian, of course, the president's trip continues, and all eyes are on Wednesday's high-stakes summit with Vladimir Putin in Geneva.
Yeah, that's right. So we've had Biden's closing presser, then he and the First Lady meeting the Queen again at Windsor, then to Brussels to reaffirm that, as you say, America is back and a leading member of NATO. But all eyes on Geneva, as you say, in the meeting with Vladimir Putin. The Russians are saying relations are at a low ebb, which is probably an understatement. And although we'll hear a lot about tough talk and confronting Putin, what we need to keep a clear eye on is what that actually means. Once again, promises, pledges. But how are you actually going to confront malign behavior? And it's worth mentioning that Team Biden choosing not to hold a joint press conference with the Russian leader, not least because he's got a great record of outwitting American presidents, but also because perhaps there's going to be a lot more heat than light when the two meet.
Ian, Pannell, thanks very much. Let's take all of this to Secretary.
And you can see there Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who was on multiple programs this morning. I have a clip of him from CBS News Face the Nation that I mentioned earlier I would show to juxtapose with former Trump Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. And I did see some European. I saw Par say hello from Vienna, Austria, while I was playing that clip. So thanks for that. And then I also took a screenshot. This is the person I was talking about who thanked me for not doing the show in the middle of the night. Isaac. That was like 90 minutes before I started the show, so I guess even though a lot of my regular viewers from the Sunday program have problems with this news time, maybe I will pick up some new regulars, and I hope that you all get comfortable together and talking with each other down in the live chat. And as I said last week, because I know that I'll probably get more recorded show viewers and less live show viewers, I'm going to try to respond to arguments that people make against things I say from the recorded show viewers. I didn't really get much last week. I just recently I got someone. I did get one that I might respond to from last week just a few hours ago, but I didn't have time to get to it because I was working on this week's show. But for the recorded show viewers, I will try to respond to more arguments in the comment section, because I know that I'm getting more recorded show views than live show views, having moved the time of my show. My other comments about that news summary, I liked Ian Pannell or Pannell or however you pronounce his name. The writing of his news summary there. I like the whole getting the band back together metaphor for the fact that Biden is a member of the club, as Macron, French President Macron said when meeting with Biden, and the contrast with Trump was there, although it was more personality. They talked about Trump being irascible and truculent. Those are great adjectives that you don't often hear on, American media, where you have to have they try to target it, I think, at the 8th grade reading level or whatever. Or I'm not sure if irascible and truculent are those 8th grade, but anyway, the thing that I didn't see a lot of that I was hoping for, and maybe it'll happen on Wednesday when Biden meets with Putin, is people comparing Biden's meeting with Putin with that infamous Helsinki meeting between Trump and Putin, where Trump seemed to side with Putin over his own intelligence agencies, and it was like one of the many, many low points of the Trump administration. And I didn't really see that discussed much yesterday. Like I said, maybe more on Wednesday when Biden actually meets with Putin. The last news clip I'm going to show you will be House Speaker Nancy Pelosi sort of touching on that. And one of the other things that you saw in that news summary that you'll see, I think you might see in other news summaries, and it was something, I don't know why they focused on this so much. They focus on these weird little issues, like, is Biden going to be holding a joint press conference with Putin, like Trump did in Helsinki, to his great detriment? No, he's going to do a solo press conference. And should he meet with Putin? Should he hold a joint press conference with Putin. These little issues are, for some reason, like focal points of media attention. But speaking of the focal points of media attention, I'm going to move on to the next news summary, which is the Fox News Sunday news summary with Chris Wallace and Peter Doocy. Peter Doocy is probably the least, or the most biased, I should say, the least journalistic of all the news commentators you're going to see today. And the fact that he's a supposedly straight news reporter on Fox News continues to amaze me. And I think you'll see the subtle bias here of all the juxtapositions with Trump, and you saw a little bit of it there, irascible and truculent. I don't think you see much of it actually seems like Peter Doocy is trying to make Biden look worse than Trump, because Trump was like he was not a member of the club, and this is going for like the Trump base. He was like he broke the rules, and he was a disruptor. And I think you can see that as kind of the subtext of Peter Doocy's news summary here after Chris Wallace does the introduction on Fox News Sunday yesterday morning. Over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. President Biden continues to meet with American allies in Europe, hoping to rally them to join the U.S. in countering Russia and China. He's trying to engage them on trade and human rights, on COVID and climate change, pledging America is back as a better partner than it was under President Trump. All this before the main event of the trip, when he sits down with Russian President Putin in Geneva on Wednesday. This hour, a fascinating exchange as we talk with both Secretary of State Antony Blinken and his immediate predecessor, former Secretary Mike Pompeo, about the change in foreign policy from Trump to Biden. But first, let's bring in Peter Doocy with the latest on the president's meeting with the other leaders of the G7 industrial democracies.
The U.S. is back.
Back trying to make nice with leaders in Europe.
It's great to have the U.S. president part of the club.
The G7 featured a lot of photo ops and some major announcements, like a plan to donate 1 billion COVID-19 vaccine doses to low-income countries and to confront problems on the horizon.
The key challenges of this century: cybersecurity, emerging technologies, global health, and climate change.
The full G7 is planning to sign a joint communique Sunday condemning China for unfair trade practices and human rights abuses. From the G7, Biden heads to NATO headquarters in Belgium with Russian aggression on the agenda, then flies to Geneva for a meeting with the Russian president.
We're not seeking conflict with Russia.
Putin is already sizing Biden up.
President Biden, of course, is radically different from Trump because President Biden is a career man. He has spent virtually his entire adulthood in politics.
President Biden doesn't want to give too much away publicly.
What's your message to Putin?
So you have to deliver it.
So it doesn't sound as though that meeting will be like this one, with lots of joking and elbow bumping. The U.S. and Russia are both already outlining major issues with one another they want to discuss, and there will not be a joint press conference afterwards. The White House tells us the president is going to come out and explain how he thinks it went with Putin solo. Chris?
Peter Doocy traveling with the president in England. Peter, thanks for that. And joining us now, the Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
Like I said, I will have an Antony Blinken clip, not from Fox News Sunday, although I will have former Secretary of State Michael Pompeo from Fox News Sunday, where Chris Wallace does not do a very good job cross-examining him on the weaknesses of the Trump administration on Russia. And I think you heard some of the subtext I was talking about there from Peter Doocy. And I don't know, it seemed like Peter Doocy always seems to have some sort of like, well, I saw in the live comments along the way while we were watching that clip, who was it who said, Peter Reed, Doocy is as Doocy does, like father, like son. Yeah, Steve Doocy of Fox and Friends fame, one of the most biased, hosts. I guess the Fox and Friends people are hosts. One of the most biased people on Fox and Friends, and I don't know. It's quite a competition for who's most biased on Fox News, but yes, I agree with Peter Reed that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as they say, and you can let me know what you think about that news summary from Fox News Sunday, and if, like I said, it has that bias against Biden, but which I could make like a Fox News bias video every day based on what they do, and maybe I should start making more Fox News bias videos. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section about that, but I want to move on to the next two news summaries, both of which are under a minute. The first one is the CBS News Face the Nation news summary from John Dickerson, who's in for Margaret Brennan during her maternity leave. I think it's less biased than the Fox News one I just showed before. It's very brief, and I'll talk about it with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. President Biden wrapped up the first leg of his first foreign trip this morning, signing an agreement with G7 leaders vowing new cooperation in the fights against COVID and climate change, before he headed off to Brussels, where he'll hold his first meeting with NATO leaders. And then it's off to Geneva for a meeting with Vladimir Putin. It's a jam-packed trip, which also included a meeting with the Queen. Before that, President Biden took questions from reporters.
And I think how we act and whether we pull together as democracies is going to determine whether our grandkids look back 15 years from now and say, did they step up?
We begin this morning with Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who is in Brussels. Good morning, Mr. Secretary.
And I will have that Antony Blinken clip from Face the Nation, the very beginning clip that John Dickerson is starting to ask the question there. You'll get to see that in the clip after next. And Face the Nation was the only program, CNN State of the Union covered the Biden press conference live. Face the Nation, I guess, is it later than the other programs? Because they had that clip from Biden's press conference that I actually showed a longer version of that clip as my second clip earlier in the show. And there's also a link down in the video description to the entire Biden press conference in the UK yesterday. But I want to get to the final news summary. And before I get there, I have to say that Face the Nation did two much longer news summaries about the state of COVID, the COVID-19 epidemic, and there are some interesting developments of it. The Delta variant and the attempt to the Americans have pledged to give 500 million doses of vaccine, and they're getting the Europeans to give all these. They're trying to get vaccines all over the world because that protects us from things like this Delta variant or the 117 variant, and how there may be another wave of COVID infections, and how COVID is also, there are large parts of the world where it's still quite a threat. If you go to the link down in the video description to the CBS News Face the Nation YouTube channel, you'll see the report from Mark Strassman and the report from Elizabeth Palmer about COVID in the United States and COVID around the world. I didn't take those news summaries. I just showed you the news summary at the beginning of Face the Nation. So I don't want to denigrate CBS. As I've said many times, CBS News was the first and best of the news analysis programs from Sunday mornings to cover the COVID-19 epidemic. Sometimes, I said CBS might be called the COVID broadcasting system because how well they covered it. Back in like January and February of 2020, I was talking about how CBS was either hyping the threat from COVID, or they were the only one of the programs that were covering the biggest story of the year. And guess what? It turned out to be number 2. I've said that many times. But anyway, I couldn't finish the CBS News Face the Nation news summary without saying that. And then I want to get to the CNN State of the Union news summary from Dana Bash, which actually, of all the news summaries, even though it's one of the shortest, it's a few seconds longer than the Face the Nation one. It covers 3 different stories, including this possible scandal from the Trump Department of Justice, where they subpoenaed the phone records or subpoena Apple. They subpoenaed the Apple Corporation for communications from all these members of Congress, and then also White House counsel Don McGahn, and that requires investigation to see how big a scandal it is. But CNN State of the Union actually put it in the first minute of the program. And of course, Dana Bash also followed Jake Tapper's long practice of saying, what is the State of the Union this week? Well, let's watch that minute together and find out, and talk about it after we watch it together over here.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the state of our union is trying to mend fences and build bridges. As President Biden is welcomed back to the club at the G7 summit in Europe, he is also preparing for a closely watched summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin as tensions between the two countries continue to rise. The president will take questions from reporters this hour. We will bring that press conference to you live when it happens. In the meantime, the president's priorities here at home, from infrastructure to voting rights, have run smack into the reality of a 50-50 Senate. And late this week, a stunning new revelation prompted an uproar on Capitol Hill and beyond. We learned that the Trump Justice Department seized cell phone data from the now former president's political enemies, their families, including members of Congress. And joining me now exclusively is the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi. Thank you so much. It's nice to see you.
And I will have a clip of that Nancy Pelosi interview as my final newsmaker clip before the bonus Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip of my dog Sandy and cat Dash for the Dash and Sandy fans out there. And this bonus Dash and Sandy clip at the end, by the way, I have to give like a trigger warning or like discretion. Maybe the violence in this Dash and Sandy clip may be too extreme for some young puppies and kittens. Oh, I'm talking about Sandy, and she's right there looking at me. But just stay tuned for that, because there is some kitten on puppy violence in the Dash and Sandy clip this week after the Nancy Pelosi clip. But like I said, kudos to Dana Bash and CNN State of the Union for covering not only Biden's European trip, not only the DOJ scandal. I actually almost made that my topic. I was going to take some clips and talk about the DOJ subpoena scandal and call it like Big Brother Trump is watching, but there's just not enough information as to like what was the predicate, what was the rationale that the Department of Justice used to issue these subpoenas, and what did they look at, and how long did it go on, and who issued them? Like Bill Barr and Rod Rosenstein are both claiming that they don't know anything about it, and so we need more information about that scandal before I can cover it well, but maybe I'll get a chance to cover it in the future. But now I want to get to my newsmaker clips. I promised you Antony Blinken, the Secretary of Antony, not Anthony, Antony, no H, Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State for the Biden administration, juxtaposed with Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State in the Trump administration. Then I'll have the ranking Republican from the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Michael McCaul, and the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Those are the 4 clips I'm about to show you. And the first one, here's Antony Blinken talking about, he's asked by John, I chose this clip amongst his many appearances because John Dickerson specifically asked him about my title topic, something Joe Biden wrote in an editorial saying that it's democracy versus autocracy. And anyway, I will show you. This is almost 6 minutes. It's about the same length of time as the Mike Pompeo clip that I show in juxtaposition. So let's start with Antony Blinken, and I will read your live comments as we watch this clip together, and I'll discuss it afterwards. Like I said, Antony Blinken was on multiple programs, but this is the clip from CBS News Face the Nation over here.
Mr. Secretary, the president wrote in the Washington Post that one of the purposes of this meeting would be to demonstrate that democracies can confront autocracies. But the Russian gas pipeline is going into Germany. China is heavily invested in many European countries. What appetite did the president find for confrontation among these democracies whose economies are so enmeshed with autocracies?
Well, John, first, let's take a step back. The proposition that the president had is we need to demonstrate that democracies can deliver in all sorts of ways to better the lives of our people. And that's exactly what he's demonstrated just in the last couple of days alone at the G7. Look at what's come out of this summit. By the way, I've been involved in these G7s for probably 25 years. This is the most consequential one I've been involved in. 1 billion shots in arms around the world with the COVID vaccine. Dealing in a very meaningful way with climate change in terms of getting a prohibition on financing coal projects around the world, the largest single contributor to global warming. A commitment on the 15% minimum global corporate tax, a powerful way of increasing the tax base for countries around the world, avoiding a race to the bottom in terms of corporate taxation, making sure countries have the resources to invest in their people, in infrastructure, in healthcare, in technology, and new markets for our products at the same time. And finally, this Build Back Better world, which is taking to the world what we're already doing at home, helping use this moment, this inflection point, to pool the resources of all of the democracies to invest in and get the private sector to invest in low and middle income countries to strengthen their health systems, their infrastructure, their technology. And that's going to also benefit us. So I say all this because it's important that the president's basic proposition, we have to show democracies coming together can deliver real results. That's already what we've shown.
Right. Those are
when it comes to dealing with go ahead, John.
Well, those are some results. But when it comes to confronting China, I mean, you've talked about the ongoing genocide in China. That's very strong language. Other U.S. officials have said that China is assaulting basic human values. What appetite is there among those the president is meeting to use that kind of harsh language? And at the end of the day, what does that language do to change Chinese behavior in the first place?
Well, first, one of the things you're seeing out of the G7 is in the communique that I think is about to be released, a focus on China. Go back to 2018, the last time the G7 came together in person. There wasn't even a mention of China in the communique. I think that is evidence in and of itself that countries are concerned across the board in many of China's actions. It's a complicated relationship for virtually all of the G7 countries. It's in some aspects adversarial, in other aspects competitive, and in other aspects cooperative. But the common denominator, and I think this is where these countries are coming together, is we need to be able to deal with China in all of those areas, coming from a position of strength and coming from a united position. I think what the president was able to do in these last couple of days was bring countries closer together in dealing with some of the challenges posed by China. And we can talk about Xinjiang or any of the others if you like.
I'd like to move on to Russia in a moment, but let me ask about the Chinese have said they're not going to help the U.S. investigate the potential of a lab leak in the start of COVID-19. Does the U.S. have any sway in getting cooperation from the Chinese?
I think not only the United States, but the world is insisting on it. One of the things that's coming out of the G7 is an insistence that the WHO be able to move forward with China cooperating on this so-called Phase 2 report to build on the initial report, which had real problems with it, not the least of which was China's failure to cooperate. And here's the thing, John, coming out of this, we need a couple of things. We need to understand what happened. We need to get to the bottom of it. And we're working on that through the WHO. We're also working on that ourselves. The president ordered a 90-day sprint led by our intelligence community to try to get to the bottom of it. And the main purpose is to make sure that knowing what happened, why it happened, how it happened, we can put in place what's necessary to prevent it from happening again, or at least to mitigate the next outbreak. China has to cooperate with that. Transparency, access for international experts, information sharing, that has to happen. And again, I think you're seeing countries coming together to insist on that.
Let me move on to Russia. I asked one of your predecessors, Condoleezza Rice, former Secretary of State, how to judge the meeting with Putin. She said, ignore the theater review, the theater reviews of it, ignore the moment, but look several months down the road to see if the Russians have gotten the messages that have been delivered privately. So what should we look for in 6 months or so that will show that there have been fruits of this actual meeting?
Look, I think Secretary Rice is exactly right. This is not a light switch moment. This is about the president wanting to do two things, and he's been very clear about it. To tell President Putin directly that we seek a more predictable, stable relationship. And if we're able to do that, there are areas where it's in our mutual interest to cooperate. But if Russia continues to take reckless and aggressive actions, we'll respond forcefully, as we've already done when it comes to election interference, when it comes to the SolarWinds cyber attack, when it comes to the attempt to poison and kill Mr. Navalny. And this is a beginning of testing that proposition. And Russia will have to decide by its actions which direction it wants to go in. And I think Secretary Rice is exactly right that we'll see that play out in the months ahead.
So yeah, there was the Secretary of State for the Biden administration laying out the answer to the original question, how is the Biden administration being the leader in the fight of democracies against autocracies, specifically Russia and China. And I think John Dickerson did a good job eliciting the Biden administration position and had some combative questions there. Definitely a better job, I think, than Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday. And like I said, I'm juxtaposing these two newsmaker clips because Mike Pompeo, the former Trump Secretary of State, was on Fox News Sunday exclusively to refute the Biden administration position that they're a breath of fresh air and they're basically, by the way, one of the alternate titles I was thinking of using before I decided on Biden leads, before I decided on the title Biden leads Democracies against Autocracies, I was thinking I might use the title Biden cleans up Trump's mess in Europe is basically what's going on. Trump left a lot of problems, and his relationship with Vladimir Putin was one of the worst ones. I talked about that Helsinki press conference where he took the side of Putin over American intelligence agencies and seemed to kowtow to him. And like I said, I'm going to show Nancy Pelosi talking about that in the final newsmaker clip in just a few minutes. But Chris Wallace barely touches on that. He has the lightest cross-examination of Mike Pompeo's claim that the Trump administration was so tough on Russia. And it's just ridiculous Fox News bias, and it's bias by itself, but also juxtaposed against the CBS News Face the Nation clip of Biden Secretary of State Antony Blinken specifically, I think. But I will talk about that bias a little more after we watch. This is about the same length. The alternate universe view from Trump's Secretary of State, and Chris Wallace, like I said, does not do a great job cross-examining him on the many weaknesses of Trump when it came to Vladimir Putin, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
You just heard my conversation with Secretary Blinken. Your reaction?
Well, generically, when I hear the administration talk about taking America back, they're talking about back to what President Obama did for 8 years, where America was weak. We might have been liked. I've seen a lot of people talk about how they're having this really fun time over at the G7. Everybody likes President Biden. What's important is not that they like America, but that they respect us, that we deliver good outcomes for the American people. We need to focus on the things that matter most to America. When I hear that they have raised climate change to the singularly most important topic that they're going to cover when the great European economies and the great economy of the United States of America meet together to have a chance to grow and create prosperity and build out peace throughout the world. When I hear the Green New Deal is the top of the agenda, I worry that we've raised an issue that is not the thing that will make lives better for the American people most quickly and most dramatically.
As we've said, the centerpiece of this trip is this coming Wednesday in Geneva when President Biden sits down with Russian President Putin. You have been critical of Biden as being too soft on Russia. You criticize the fact that he renewed the START 5 nuclear arms treaty. You criticize the fact that he also lifted the sanctions that allow completion of the Nord Stream gas pipeline between Russia and Germany. When these two men sit down on Wednesday, are you worried about what's going to happen?
Well, I heard Secretary Blinken say the right words, right? We want to find the places that we can work alongside the Russians. We tried to do that too. But there was no administration that was tougher on Russia. We worked diligently to support Ukraine with defensive weapon systems. We built out the United States military. Chris, we left NATO $400 billion stronger than we took over. We built out that relationship between the United States and NATO in a way that really put pressure on Vladimir Putin. What I'll look for is the actions. It won't be about what is said. It won't be about whether the tone is right. It will be about the actions that the United States government is prepared to take to preserve and defend American interests and stop Russian malign activity around the world. You'll recall when you hear President Biden talk about taking us back is the Russians taking Crimea on the watch of President Obama, a fifth of Ukraine. That's not a back that the United States can afford to allow to happen. We need to move forward, and we need to continue to defend the United States against the threats that Vladimir Putin may pose, whether it's cyber or kinetic or any of the other information efforts that Vladimir Putin will try to foist upon America if President Biden is weak.
Well, let me ask you about a specific issue, and I think it's right now at the top of the agenda, and that is ransomware, these attacks on vital U.S. infrastructure coming from gangs out of Russia. I asked Secretary Blinken about that, and he said with the support of all the allies that the U.S. is prepared to take action. He wouldn't say what it was, but to take action if Russia is going to continue to harbor these gangs. What action should President Biden be willing to take?
So, Chris, it's really a tale of three pipelines, right? We shut down 10,000 jobs with the Keystone Pipeline here in the United States of America, and then they permitted the Russian pipeline to continue to be built that will threaten the heart of Europe's energy infrastructure. And then, of course, you were referring to the cyber attack on the Colonial Pipeline. President Trump and our team were very clear about what we would do in response to cyber attacks. We changed, it's a pretty arcane idea, but we changed the NSPM, the rules that permitted us to respond to these attacks. I hope that the Biden administration will use the tools that we provided. We've got the capacity to respond to this in a way that imposes costs not only on the perpetrators themselves, sometimes criminal gangs, sometimes state-sponsored, state-backed entities, but make sure that we impose those costs in a place that Vladimir Putin, who is allowing this to take place from his soil, can actually feel the cost and convince him that it's in his best interest to stop this from happening and stop attacking America through this cyber tool that is not much different than other kinds of attacks on the United States.
But, Mr. Secretary, let's look back at the Trump record. Under President Trump, the administration didn't stop Russia from completing, and they continued during the Trump administration to build the Nord Stream pipeline. By the end of the administration, it was 90% completed, and President Trump never condemned Russia for the poisoning of Alexei Navalny or his arrest, and both of those happened on his watch.
Well, Chris, you said it yourself. They didn't complete the pipeline. We'd imposed real sanctions on the ships that were doing the construction, the insurers that were underwriting it. We made clear that that pipeline was not going to be completed. It would not have been completed had we had 4 more years. I'm very, very confident of that. And with respect to human rights, we take a back seat to no one. I heard Secretary Blinken talk about the work they're doing to try and convince the Europeans to stand alongside us on human rights violations in China and the work that they've done defending human rights against Russian abuses. We were tough there too, Chris. I'm proud of the work we did there. It was good work, it was serious work, and it made a difference.
You also criticize President Biden for not pushing hard enough on China to learn the
Oh, sorry about that. Sorry, I was listening without my earpiece there, and I apologize for that noise, the feedback noise there. I hate when that happens. It happened twice last week, hopefully only once this week, and then 0 after that. I don't know why I'm having more trouble with that since I've switched to Monday. That doesn't make sense. But anyway, you saw there Mike Pompeo, before I made that terrible noise, was not very well cross-examined by Chris Wallace when he claimed no administration has been tougher on Russia than the Trump administration. He's talked about getting the support of our allies, Chris Wallace did, but he never really talked about the way the Trump administration had this track record of criticizing our NATO allies and even criticizing our, the NATO charter, saying, Section 5 or whatever that says that, an attack on one is an attack on all, and Trump criticized that and made it seem like maybe the United States wouldn't honor that, and did all sorts of things to undermine NATO, even one saying it was obsolete. Trump said that, but Chris Wallace never brought that up. Mike Pompeo also used this talking point, I think, that you're going to hear from a lot of Republicans. I'm going to show you Michael McCaul in a minute. He messed up the tale of 3 pipelines talking point, because he forgot and said 2 pipelines, but it's the Nord Stream pipeline that the Biden administration is letting supposedly the Russians finish to Germany to provide natural gas to Western Europe, and the Colonial Pipeline hack that was carried out by Russian gangs, and then the pipeline up in North Dakota that the Biden administration finally decided the Canadian pipeline that the Biden administration finally nixed and has finally been the company that was going to build it has decided they're not going to build it anymore, and I guess the Republicans are going to try to use those. What is the name of that pipeline? Anyone down in the live comments? I think I'm a little behind, so maybe you can't help me. But what was the name of that pipeline? Not the Colonial Pipeline, not the Nord Stream pipeline. What was the third pipeline? But anyway, I'm sure someone will remind me down in the comment section. The Canadian pipeline that Mike Pompeo was talking about. That apparently is going to be a Republican talking point, because Michael McCaul will screw it up with only saying 2 pipelines but mentioning all 3 in the next clip. But I kept that Fox News Sunday interview clip playing as long as I did, so you could see Chris Wallace did not follow up the XL pipeline. Thank you, down in the live comments. They finally showed up. You caught up with me, and thank you for the XL pipeline. Marilyn and Peter Reed, thank you. And so, yeah, Chris Wallace, after asking just about how the Trump administration let the Russians finish 90% of the Nord Stream pipeline, and then talking about how the Trump administration never condemned Russia for Alexei Navalny being poisoned and jailed, which all happened on Trump's watch. Those were the only 2 things Chris Wallace could come up with in terms of the weakness of the Trump. Nothing about that Helsinki press conference, nothing about the Russia collusion I was talking about earlier, the Roger Stone collusion with WikiLeaks, the Paul Manafort collusion with Konstantin Kilimnik, the Don Jr. meeting in Trump Tower with Russians to get dirt on Hillary, all that Russia collusion, and all the weird things that Trump said about Putin, and how he had these secret meetings with no notes taken, and all sorts of things that Chris Wallace could have done for cross-examination, and none of it was in there. And anyway, that was my criticism of the Fox News Sunday interview with Mike Pompeo, and I want to show, sort of juxtapose it with this ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos interview with the ranking Republican on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Michael McCaul. This is Martha Raddatz, the co-host of This Week with George Stephanopoulos, asking about Biden being a breath of fresh air for the Europeans and about his upcoming meeting with Putin. And like I said, when I was criticizing that previous clip, you'll hear Michael McCaul screw up the tale of three pipelines, which apparently is the XL pipeline, the Colonial pipeline, and the Nord Stream pipeline. But he calls it two pipelines, even though he mentions all three of the pipelines in the final Republican clip before I show the Nancy Pelosi clip to finish the show today. Like I said, this is Martha Raddatz talking to Michael McCaul about some of those same talking points you heard from Mike Pompeo, which this is why Mike Pompeo is going to run for president and Michael McCaul will not, because Mike Pompeo, for all his evil, presented those talking points a lot better than Michael McCaul. And well, it's a little bit shorter clip, but still, Mike Pompeo is much more likely to be the Republican nominee than I don't even think Michael McCaul is going to run. And Mike Pompeo is definitely running. I mean, unless Trump runs, or maybe even if Trump runs, or who knows. But anyway, here's the Michael McCaul clip that I've over-introduced, which I will talk about with you after we watch together over here.
I was really struck by the contrast coming out of the G7. You just heard Tony Blinken talking about the contrast between President Biden, former President Trump's visits with European leaders. The images alone are pretty striking, and so is the substance. We've seen new agreements on everything from vaccine sharing to global minimum tax rates. Boris Johnson called talks with Biden a breath of fresh air. Does this change concern you, or do you welcome it?
Yeah, look, I think it's important we work with our NATO allies, work with the G7. I think in the past, and I think Trump, the frustration was there's a lot of talk and no action. And so that's why he espoused America first. We want to espouse our ideals over our European partners. Now, I think it's better when we work together. I do think it's smart to meet with our NATO allies and G7 prior to the Putin summit, which is going to be the most powerful and most dangerous meeting this trip.
And some in your party say that President Biden shouldn't meet with Vladimir Putin because of these enormous cyber attacks and what's happening in Russia. You've said it looks like a reward.
Well,
but
I think
Tony Blinken said, this is something we want to do.
I think the price for admission to the ticket for this seat was way too high. I mean, for instance, Nord Stream 2 pipeline. The president waived in the national interest Nord Stream 2, which will be Putin's pipeline going into Europe, so that European, our partners will be dependent on Russian energy. I don't think that's in the United States' national interest. And quite frankly, it's not in Europe's best interest either. And this really empowered Putin when this happened. And I think we're giving him a lot of stuff.
I want to just stop you there for a second. The Germans, one of our key allies, support the project and say that not seeing it through would have larger geopolitical ramifications with Russia than canceling it.
Right, and Germany's the only sympathetic country in Europe that wants this. Their former chancellor is a lobbyist for the Russian, Federation, which calls into question a lot of this. I think it's a bad move. I don't think it's in our national interest to do so, and I think we're not. You want to go into these talks in a position of strength, not of weakness. I think he's going in a little bit out of weakness because he's made all these concessions, including Navalny, which Congress mandatorily called for those sanctions on Nord Stream, but also on Navalny. And President Biden has not enforced those secondary sanctions on the chemical poisoning of the opposition leader of Putin.
And what really should he do? I put this to Tony Blinken as well. Sanctions have not changed Vladimir Putin's behavior much.
Well, the threat of sanctions on Nord Stream did shut it down. That's a good point to make. I agree with you. And then when it comes to cyber attacks, I mean, here we go. We let him go forward with the pipeline, Martha. And then the Russians hacked Colonial Pipeline, or a organized criminal element, which I think is all interconnected personally. I think Putin has tacit approval on this. But we had SolarWinds, which was state sanctioned. And now we have what's happened with Colonial Pipeline, yet no repercussions the irony is the two pipeline here, right? We allow Putin's pipeline, shut down Keystone, and then the Russians hack Colonial Pipeline. To me, there's something disturbing about that.
Who wins in a cyber war with Russia?
And there you see it's actually a Keystone XL pipeline, and I saw in the live comments that it was Nakura CA. I don't know how is that Nakura, California, Nakura Ka. I don't know how you pronounce that, but yeah, Keystone XL pipeline is the third pipeline, which I messed up, and then I'm also criticizing Michael McCaul there for getting the two pipelines instead of the tale of three pipelines, which why do I get the feeling that I'm going to be hearing about the tale of three pipelines all the way through the 2024 election? I think, mark my words, that the tale of three pipelines is, just like wokeness and critical race theory and Dr. Seuss are all going to be issues that Republicans try to ride through 2022 congressional elections and all the way through the 2024 presidential election, depending on who they nominate. Who knows? But anyway, I think I've shown those Republican talking points, trying to make us forget what we saw in the last 4 years in terms of Trump kowtowing to Putin at his Helsinki press conference, the Russia collusion that didn't rise to the level of criminal charges in the Mueller report, but like I said, still showed Paul Manafort giving the polling information to Russian agent Konstantin Kilimnik. So, that helps the Russians target how they want to release the material they hacked from the DNC. And then Roger Stone coordinated with WikiLeaks as to when that hacked material would be released during the campaign. And of course, Don Jr. met with Russians in Trump Tower in June 2016 to get dirt on Hillary Clinton. And so that's all Russia collusion that actually happened, even though it didn't rise to the level of a criminal conspiracy for various reasons I've discussed before. Who was it? I saw someone in the live comments. Marilyn, all that is Russiagate nonsense. Nonsense. All those things are true. Is anything Roger Stone was convicted, then pardoned, but convicted for the lies he told and his coordinating with WikiLeaks, regarding his coordinating with WikiLeaks on the release of the hacked DNC materials. The only reason that wasn't the Russia collusion didn't rise to the level of criminal conspiracy is that WikiLeaks has First Amendment protection for releasing hacked materials when they weren't the ones who hacked it. So coordinating with a First Amendment protected release person who releases information means you can't be prosecuted criminally. And then Paul Manafort refused to cooperate and used apps that had encrypted or disappearing communications so that the Mueller investigation can never find out exactly what happened with the information he gave to Konstantin Kilimnik. And then actually in the Don Jr. Trump Tower June 2016 meeting with Russians, they decided Don Jr. might be too stupid to form the criminal intent to understand that he was getting something of value from a foreigner, because it's against the law to get something of value from a foreign person or entity or government in a political campaign, a federal political campaign. And he actually, or even to solicit it, and he definitely solicited this opposition research from Russians. But the Mueller report concluded Donald Trump Jr. might be too stupid to form the criminal intent necessary to convict him. So those are all facts. Read the Mueller report. It's all in there. That's not what was it? All that is Russiagate nonsense? No, those are all facts in the Mueller report. I read the Mueller report. I reported on the Mueller report in my Sunday live clip roundups. I'm not making any of that up. That's all true. But you got me off on a big Russia collusion tangent there that I didn't mean to go on, and I wanted to just use Nancy Pelosi's briefer comment to CNN's Dana Bash on State of the Union yesterday. This is my final newsmaker clip where someone finally is talking about some of these issues with the Trump administration and Putin. Not the Russia collusion, but some of the Helsinki thing. And anyway, I've talked for long enough. I should show the final newsmaker clip. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi talking to Dana Bash about the contrast between Biden and Trump dealing with Russia. Over here.
Before I let you go, I want to look overseas, look ahead to this week.
Yeah.
President Biden has a big meeting with Vladimir Putin. What do you want to see out of that meeting? And specifically, I want to go back to something that happened on the show last week. The Energy Secretary, Jennifer Granholm, said that U.S. adversaries have the capability to shut down the power grid. You have tremendous expertise in intelligence. How worried are you about this, and should President Biden bring it up?
Well, I'm very proud of the fact that the president is in Europe saying we're back. We're back for climate. We're back for open society. We're open for the relationship that we've had in NATO in terms of security, which is so important. And I can tell you in my meetings with all these people, most of it pre-COVID, but much of it by Zoom since then, that they are so happy that America is back and that look forward to this visit by the president. In terms of his meeting with Putin, I think that he should meet with them. They should have a line of communication, and issues like cybersecurity and energy, of course, are not necessarily on the table in that meeting, but are the reality that we have to deal with. And energy and cybersecurity are probably two items that may come up at that meeting, but that we have to be prepared for whether they do or not. Now, let's just make a contrast. The former president of the United States, for whatever reason, whether the Russians had personal, political, or financial leverage over him, just kowtowed, catered to Putin in a way that was humiliating to the United States of America. And when Putin hears about some of the violations of the rights of his own people, he laughs. This is a thug. This is a thug. But he is the head of an important state in terms of the issues you raised. The president should meet with him. And I think he's going to meet a very different president than one who was at the mercy of Putin.
Madam Speaker, I so appreciate you coming in. Again, nice to see you in person as we come out of the...
So there you go. That is Nancy Pelosi providing a little bit of an antidote to what you heard from Michael McCaul and Mike Pompeo, the two dishonest Mikes, I guess, that we just saw from the Republican Party in the previous two clips. I saw in the live comments after my whole thing about Russia collusion that Maryland is claiming that Roger Stone did not coordinate with WikiLeaks, which I usually try to only talk about as long as the length of my clips. My clips were about 28 minutes long, and I think, the program is already, so that would mean a 56-minute program. I'm already 10 minutes over this week, so I don't want to go into a whole thing about... But look at Roger Stone. What was Roger Stone in... he got convicted of 7 counts. Go read the 7 counts Roger Stone was convicted for, and then come back and maybe we can argue some other time, Maryland. But I did promise a Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip for the Dash and Sandy fans out there who may have migrated over from my Sunday show. Dash is my cat, and Sandy is my dog, and they usually get along pretty well. I've shown many clips of how, Sandy the dog is very sweet and will take a lot of abuse, and I've shown how, like, Dash the cat will go and eat will eat her food, and Sandy the dog won't even do anything about it. But as I mentioned before, trigger warning here, there is some cat on dog violence you're about to see that may be too extreme for some sensitive viewers, so wait for it. This is a little over a minute long, but I guess what happens is Dash the cat likes his space, and there's this sort of limited space area where they kind of congregate over, well, you'll see they're in a very small space, and I guess the cat didn't like it in the Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip to finish the program today over here. Ooh. What was that all about? Anyway, that actually was from Saturday, but I thought it was worth saving and showing to you all as the Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip for the day. I will try to continue that tradition on Mondays like I did on Sundays. I don't know if anyone appreciates that, but I appreciate all of you, the 40-something people who showed up for the live show, and I hope I'll have some recorded show viewers. I will be back every Sunday throughout the summer as I check out how this show works and whether people are interested in showing up at the new time. And it's, like I said before I changed from Sunday to Monday, it gives me more family time on Sunday, so it is less detriment to me, so I don't mind so much as to not making the same financial rewards from doing, it takes me 8 to 10 hours still, or maybe even a little. I spend a little more time on the Monday show than the Sunday show because I have more time. But if you want to support the program financially, I noticed this week there were no super chat contributions, but if you're a recorded show viewer and you want to support the program financially, there's a link down in the video description for direct PayPal contributions or to become a monthly patron on Patreon. There's also a join button down below the video if you want to become a YouTube member, but Patreon's better than YouTube membership, and direct PayPal contributions are probably the most efficient way of financially supporting the program. If that's something you're interested in, you can also just give me a thumbs up or subscribe to my channel, leave a supportive comment or any comment. Getting some comments in the recorded show version, like I said, I'll be happy to respond to the comments of recorded show viewers, especially if you are disagreeing with something I said. So and Sandy's coming over and whining now, so I'm going to finish the show. I will be back next Sunday, like I said, and for every Sunday through the summer. I think I might make an edited, produced video about this New York Times article criticizing the ACLU's posture on free speech that Bill Maher talked about last Friday on his program. This is something I know a lot about, and I might even talk about critical race theory, because I think actually critical race theory has something to do with some of the changes in perspective in the ACLU on free speech issues. But if you are interested in seeing a video about that, you are one of the most committed viewers who's watched this program all the way to the very end, you can let me know about that in the comment section too. And anyway, until next Monday, or until I have some other kind of video to upload and share with you, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.